What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Point2Point NHL Recap Show. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark. Mark, how you doing?
Not too bad, buddy. We're into the thick of things now at the final eight in the NHL, kind of like halfway through this second round here. Could have a series done tonight with the Rangers and Carolina, but Carolina, I don't know, they might be able to advance. We'll see. But it's been honestly probably a better second round than a first round, I would say. So it's pretty
Yeah,
good that playoffs are getting better. How are you doing, buddy?
dude, I'm doing great. Just before we talk about myself here, that New York Carolina game, it's officially final right now. So New York lost last tonight. Carolina took it 4-1, so there will be a game six in this series. Honestly, I'm happy there's gonna be a game six, dude, because after the first three games, my Hurricanes in seven prediction was looking god awful. But now that there's game six, even if they do lose in game six, at least I still have like somewhat of credibility after that. But no,
Yeah.
I'm doing good, man. I got a new PC, which I've been talking to you about earlier. I'm loving it so far. It's gonna help out for the podcast a lot because one of the biggest issues with the podcast the last couple of weeks has been just like takes forever to do editing and exporting gets all messed up. So now that I have like a pretty good PC, we'll be able to get podcasts out just like bam, 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 So that's gonna be big, but let's get right into the big news with around the NHL because there's a lot of big news. But breaking news, it only came out a couple hours ago. Valerie Nichushkin, he's gone into stage 3 of the NHL NHLPA Player Assistance Program. So basically, he's going to be suspended without pay for a minimum of 6 months. And then after those 6 months pass, he will be able to apply for a reinstatement. But that's big news. And honestly, I don't think has a player ever gone into stage 3 of the player assistance program? Like, I don't think so.
Not that I know of, to be honest, dude. It doesn't really sound like it's like familiar that it's like happened recently at all, but um honestly it was just kind of a surprise, to be quite honest with you. It seems like everything's just like happening with this guy once the playoffs get going. So I
Yeah.
mean, overall it's a pretty huge loss for the Avs, I think, to be honest with you. Getting Drouin back's definitely a good thing, but you're not really adding to that roster. You're just taking the guy off. Nichushkin's been a beast so far in these playoffs for Colorado, so definitely a big loss for Colorado and him. Hope he's able to get better. Hopefully in 6 months he'll be kind of in a better place and able to like reapply to play again or whatever he has to do to start playing. But going to be tough for the Avs to get by Dallas without him, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a bummer for him and for the Colorado Avalanche. Pardon me, it's a massive loss. Like that guy performs in the playoffs. He's a big body. He's a great guy to have in the team when it comes to playoff time. The thing with him though that I'm sort of wondering about is, as I mentioned, like I don't think a player's ever really entered stage 3 of the NHL player assistance program because usually what happens is they just either like enter it or it's sort of like what happened with Corey Perry where the team and the player terminate the contract, right? So what I'm wondering is like over the offseason, does Colorado try terminating his contract fully? Because he's unpaid for 6 months, right? And then um he can apply to be reinstated, but it's like, does
I wonder if
Colorado
they're not
try to
allowed to
find
do that though, like while he's in the middle of that. What do you think?
I think it depends on what he's going in for and like the severity of it. Cause like at the end of the day, it's all like there's a lot of legality around that, right? And like it's gonna be the lawyers fighting lawyers and I don't really know fully like what is enough to terminate, what isn't enough, what does the NHL think is enough, like what do lawyers think is enough in this case. So, but it would be interesting to see like is that something they would maybe try over the offseason? Because he is making just over $6 million a year. So if it is to
Yeah,
the
and the thing
point
is, just
where
when he's healthy and playing, like that's a good contract for
oh
him,
it
dude. He produces at a good rate. He's kind of a little beast out there, like a grinder. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
um, honestly, like I love him when he's healthy, but to be honest with you, it just seems like 2 straight years with like kind of an issue now. I really wonder what it is and how bad it is, but kind of sucks for Colorado moving forward, man.
Oh, it does for sure. Before we start to get into these round two matchups and some of the ones we hadn't talked about from round one, um, let's talk about the Leafs because in ultimate Leafs fashion, they just they just absolutely choked and cucked their fans pretty much. They come back from down 3-1, force game seven. Leafs fans so happy. What happens in game seven? Leafs don't do it. Bruins win, go on to round two. Since the Leafs lost in game seven, Sheldon Keefe, he's been fired. Brandon Shanahan, Keith Pelly, who's the new CEO of Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, and Leafs GM Brad Treliving, they all had their press conference last Friday. We're recording on Monday right now, so it's been just a couple days since their press conference. The thing that I found really interesting, and Mark, I know we were talking about this at work already, is how does how does Brandon Shanahan still have his job, man? Like, there's no way this guy should still have his job after year in year out the Leafs can't get it done in the playoffs. This guy's had almost 10 years now, man.
Yeah, dude, it's pretty surprising. I thought for sure, honestly, thought that he may have been gone last year. Um, but this year, the fact that he is not gone, I am really surprised. I honestly think he's just his that job's secure for him for a really long time because it doesn't. What does he have to do to lose the job, dude? Like, you know what I mean at this point. Um, for like Sheldon Keefe though, obviously, like. I don't know. I've been pretty vocal that I don't really think he's that great of a coach, to be honest with you. It's not that he's a bad coach or anything like that. I just think his time's kind of ran out in Toronto. He hasn't really been able to accomplish that much in the 5 years he's been a head coach there. It seems like New Jersey's got some interest in at least reaching out and interviewing him. So I do think he's probably going to end up getting a head coaching job somewhere just because the Leafs have put together good regular seasons, right? And some teams have failed to do that. So bringing in a coach that has like success, at least in the regular season, some teams are going to be attracted to that, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if Sheldon Keefe is a head coach. Probably, I don't know. I guess it depends when he wants to do that, right? He's got a
Yeah,
contract kick that hasn't even technically kicked in yet that he'd be getting paid for the entirety of it if he doesn't coach anywhere, right? But if the opportunity comes, I'm sure he'll probably take it because he's not like an older experienced coach, right? Where he can kind of sit back and it's like more or less whenever he wants to coach, he could probably get a job. Like for Keefe, it's like you never know when the opportunity is going to come, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he's somewhere next season, but the Leafs are gonna have to look for a guy. Everyone's talking about Berube. I wonder if it honestly seems like it'd be a pretty good fit and it would make sense. Like they'd be able to pay him. I heard Ottawa was like interested in him, but I think he wanted a little bit too much money for their liking, to be honest with you. But Travis Green's probably a guy we'll talk about in a little bit here. But
yeah.
what are your thoughts on like the whole well, obviously you agree with Shanahan, but like what do you think about the whole Keefe thing?
I think Keith, like, he's a good regular season coach, couldn't get it done in the playoffs. I think part of it is I do feel a bit bad for him because he is being sort of made out to be the scapegoat here, which at the end of the day, it always happens when head coaches are fired. But like, have you seen the clip of the Amazon series where like he's talking to like Joe Thornton, Mitch Marner, JT, and it was the year that your Habs came back from down 3-1, beating them in the playoffs. But he's having a meeting with those players in the regular season. He's saying like we're just not getting those hard goals, like the playoff type goals, the hard ones to get. We're not getting those, and we need to be better at that. And Joe Thornton's basically like saying like lay off of us, like we're in first place right now. So I think like yes, part of it for sure is his fault for this lack of success for the Leafs in the playoffs, but also I feel like part of it is that they just haven't given him a roster that's good enough that ever like Mitch Marner. How many times have we been like, oh, you ought to break up the core, you ought to break up the core, you ought to break up the core, and they just don't do it every year.
Yeah.
Like as much
I
as much
guess
as
it's
he
just
is
I
to
guess
blame,
it's
I think
more like they
management is as
have
well.
they have the talent up front though, right? Like which a lot of teams don't have. So I guess it's more like people are probably pissed because like they haven't been able to figure it out with like three of like the best players in the league, like you know what I mean, on their team. So I think that's probably what the frustrating thing is. But then it kind of screws up like your depth and stuff like that, right? They haven't really been able to keep the same like bottom six or anything along
Yeah.
those lines. But I think the thing with him too, dude, is like he changes up the lines a little bit too much for my liking, to be honest. It seems like guys can't really get a lot of chemistry going. So I mean that probably has some sort of effect in it. I think that they probably use towards like firing him.
Oh no, I completely agree with that. Like he last year running the whole seven defenseman type thing. I really don't understand why they kept on going back to that running seven defenseman. Like, yeah, they did get past the first round, but then we saw second round. It was an easy win for Florida going forward, right? And the other thing I don't really like about him too much is I do think he is a bit too soft at times. I don't want to say soft, but I think he could do a bit better, like getting on the boys, getting those pregame talks. Like the pregame talk I saw going into Game 7 from him, like honestly, I just wasn't really the biggest fan of. Like, come on, guys, let's go out there, let's have some fun. That sounds like something my coaches were saying to me when I was like playing in house league as a 7-year-old. Like it doesn't sound like what you should be saying to a bunch of NHL guys who want to win a cup. You gotta fire those guys up, man, going into a Game 7, especially when it's a team like the Leafs where you have all these demons in Game 7s. Like you don't want the guys to be having that in the back of their mind. You want to do whatever you can to have them fired up and go out there and perform. And at the end of the day, you just can never do that with this Leafs team. I think we should move on to the Senators though and talk about their coaching acquisition. As you mentioned earlier, they go and they get Travis Green. What do you think about this for Senators?
I don't really know, man. He hasn't really had a whole lot of success around the league. He had a one good season in Vancouver, but I think they made the playoffs. That may have been the bubble year, to be honest with you. But besides that, he seems like a pretty like inexperienced coach. I'm honestly a little bit confused with the hiring. I feel like they probably could have went out and got someone different. I don't know if money was ultimately the issue there, and it's going to be kind of the same problems with them where they're not willing to spend. But it seems kind of weird that they're giving a 4-year deal to a guy who became an interim head coach in the last third of the season because their head coach was fired in New Jersey. And that's kind of the guy you're 100% rolling with. I don't know, man. It's nothing against the guy, and it's not that I think he's a bad coach, but I'm not thinking now, oh, okay, Ottawa's going in with a good structured system next year that's going to change a lot about their team. I don't know, man. Like, are you even that convinced that it's a huge upgrade on like DJ Smith? Like DJ Smith, I think it's more just like he was there for a while and his maybe his message was going dry. I don't know, but it's like I don't feel any different when they brought in DJ Smith to when they brought in Travis Green right now. If does that make sense?
Yeah, no, like honestly for me, like I don't like this, but I also like don't hate it, like I'm sort of impartial to this. I sort of want to see what he can do because I don't want to rip the guy too much because like I don't think he's had like
Yeah, like he
enough
hasn't had the chance there yet, right? So.
and he hasn't had enough like failures within the league where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you hired this guy. You know what I mean? They really could have butchered this hiring a lot more, I feel. And I feel like part of it doesn't help that they were really committed to Craig Berube, and I think Berube's really just holding out for that Leafs job, right?
Yeah.
The thing with Ottawa too is I think they need to shake up the core a little bit as well. Um, Similar to the Leafs, maybe it is one of a bigger name. Like I'm not saying it's Brady Tkachuk or Tim Stutz or even Thomas Chabot, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody within that lineup that was in the top six or got moved. The one that I would be interested in is if you're the Leafs. Yes, I get it is in the Battle of Ontario, but here's a proposition for you: Mitch Marner for Josh Norris and Jacob Chikrin.
I think Norris has too much injury trouble to do that trade, dude. I'd be very risky about picking him up right now with his shoulder.
I, w- I would be a little bit worried about that, but that is one
Do you
trade that
really
I
think that's gonna solve the Leafs' problems, though?
I
Bringing
think
in Chikrin,
I think it would
another
help.
left-handed shooting defenseman. Yeah, it's an upgrade, but like, I don't know. I think Norris is just too much injury trouble for me, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. But I mean, if he's healthy, he's your second line center, right? So,
and then you play
and
JT is on the wing or you
or even
have him move down to the
3C.
third line.
I mean, it's an interesting proposition. I would just be worried about the injury history, even with Chikrin a little bit too. But um, mean, the salaries would almost make sense, to be honest with you. It's not a very bad proposition. I honestly thought you were going to say Brady Tkachuk, but I was going to be like, there's no chance they're sending that
No.
guy to Toronto.
All I've seen
But
is the
yeah,
Brady Kachuk one, like Marner for Kachuk. That's all I've seen the last couple of days on like TikTok and like social media and stuff. I'm like, man, you guys are insane, dude. Like, I get Brady Kachuk like wants to be in the playoffs, but like the guys, it's not like it's like Matthew Kachuk where he's on a bridge deal, right? Like the guy's locked up, dude. The guy signed an 8-year deal coming off his
yeah,
entry level. Like
it's a good contract too, like
for Ottawa, there's no
8.2.
need. Oh yeah, it's a great contract, but like for Ottawa, there's no need to trade him whatsoever.
No,
Maybe
no, not at
maybe
all.
2, 3 years down the road, if nothing changes and you guys still don't make the playoffs, then yeah, I could see it. But like, oh, people that are saying Ottawa should be trading Brady and bringing somebody in, I think they're quite frankly just insane.
No,
Let's move on.
the element he brings, I think, is like it's so valuable, dude, that I wouldn't
Yeah,
even like consider so many trades, even if they're guys around like where he produces like points wise, you know what I mean? That other element that he brings, I just think is so valuable. And I don't think like Ottawa's not going to be any better if they trade him.
if you're trading Brady Kachuk, you got to be bringing in like a no doubt 100 point score, I
Yeah.
think, or like a Norris defenseman on the other side. Let's move on though and talk about some of these round two matchups that are being played right now. Because as you mentioned earlier, round one, a lot of quick series, like a lot of 4-1s, 4-0 series. I think we only had one game seven, which was the Boston Toronto series. So that really actually, pardon
No,
me,
Vegas,
Vegas,
Dallas.
Vegas, Dallas as well. Still only two game sevens for round one, man. Like not what we were hoping for going into the first round. So second round, it has been a little bit better. Let's talk about let's talk about Carolina versus New York Rangers to kick it off because as we mentioned, Carolina won tonight. It's now going to game six. New York leads the series 3-2. This series has been first couple games were not looking good for Carolina, but man, like
It's getting interesting, dude.
it's getting interesting. The ultimate thing to happen would be that the Hurricanes come back, win in seven. My prediction's right. Garrett Parsons is miserable because he's a New York Rangers fan. New York Rangers fans are just miserable human beings, and I think if there's any fan base that deserves to watch their team blow a 3-1 lead, it's probably the New York Rangers fan base.
You hate them, eh?
Dude, like you have fans
I'm
biting
not I'm not a
people's
big fan
fingers
of the
off,
Rangers
man.
either, to
Like
be honest with you.
I just think they're scumbags, to be honest.
They are a really good hockey team though, and there was
Oh
a
yeah.
reason why they were up 3-0 in this series and had won the first 7 games that they've played in these playoffs. Um, Honestly, man, people can say whatever about Carolina's whole game plan about shooting everything to the net, and there's a lot of low quality shots, but dude, Shesterkin has been playing unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've taken a look at his like career save percentage at this point in the playoffs. Dude, he has like a 930 or something, and like Lundqvist was like a 921. So it's like, dude, this guy's putting up phenomenal numbers. I mean, for a little bit of the regular season, he wasn't playing too well, but I feel like he picked it up like after Christmas and he was showing that he's like why he's one of the best goalies in the league. But with the Rangers, dude, you got to give a lot of these guys credit. Dude, like Zibanejad probably had a little bit of an underwhelming season for his standards. Um, but he's been great in these playoffs. Panarin's been awesome as well, like Lafreniere. I've been really impressed with the Rangers, to be honest with you. But dude, with Carolina, man, these guys aren't giving up. They got swept last year in the conference finals. It wasn't happening again this year. They're
It
just
was it
sticking,
wasn't a
dude.
sweep though. It wasn't a sweep last year.
No. I
No, they
thought
didn't
the
get
same
swept.
thing was going to happen, dude, because game 2 and 3 they lost in OT, right? Like this series. Like it's been pretty close, to be honest. Like Carolina could have taken one of those games and they could be up 3-2 right now. Like, you know what I mean? It's been really close. I am so interested to see the rest of this series though and what happens. Going back to Carolina now for game 6, like I just didn't think that Carolina was going to take game 5 like in New York. And now that they've done it, like I think that they could definitely win the series, dude. Win 2 more games. They've got a lot of momentum on their side right now. They're a really deep and a good hockey team, dude. Like they could easily be back in the conference finals. So I'm really excited to watch the last 2 games or maybe last game of this series.
Yeah, I I don't want to say Carolina's coming back, but I do. It's getting not even more likely, but their their odds are getting better and better here. Like you got game six at home. That's a winnable game for sure. And then game seven, it's in New York. Yeah, New York fans are going to be wild. The team's gonna be pumped up,
They're
but
gonna be on their heels though if it goes to a game seven, dude. Like the vibes aren't gonna be the great. You know what I mean?
and
Like,
it's a game seven. Like game sevens are toss ups a lot of the time, right? Like it just comes down to a very fine margin in a game seven. And if Carolina can get there to that game seven, like I wouldn't put it past them to come back from down 3-1. And as you mentioned, Shesterkin and how phenomenal he's been in the playoffs in this series. I know you were saying that he didn't have the best regular season compared to some other regular seasons and even some other goalies around the league. But honestly, man, like I'll take that, dude. If I'm the New York Rangers, like even with the season Shesterkin had, you still win the President's Trophy for the best team in the regular season across the entire NHL. And then your goalie comes in and does this in the playoffs, man. Like I way rather have that than Connor Hellebuck, where Connor Hellebuck's the best regular goalie in the regular season, and then come playoff time, he
yeah,
lets in 5+ goals every game. Like
yeah.
I'll take it if I'm the New York Rangers any day of the week. Um, let's move on to the next series though. This game it's probably just getting kicked off right now as we're talking. It's the Dallas Colorado. Dallas is currently up 2-1 here going into game 4. They're playing right now. What have you made out of the series so far?
Well, I think what we talked about with Val Nichushkin, that's going to be a huge impact on this
Yeah.
series. Dallas, though, they're not going down easy. Obviously, Colorado went out to an early lead, but Dallas is battling back. Curious to see if they're able to take another one in Colorado because Colorado is obviously a really good home team. But if they're able to go up 3-1, I would say Colorado's going to have a really tough time coming back from that. But there's a chance to make this series 2-2. I honestly think that Colorado is going to even the series up though tonight.
I Part of me wants the fan in me wants Colorado to tie it up and have this go to a game 7. The degenerate gambling addict in me does not want this to go to game 7 whatsoever. I want Dallas to win tonight, make it 3-1, go home for game 5, take the series. Because we all know I got that Dallas Stanley Cup futures on him. I was looking at the cash out. It's $10 to win 180. I think 180 if they win the cup. I was looking at the cash out. It's only like 25, man. I'm like, no way I'm cashing that out, dude. I'm letting this ride. I am letting
Yeah,
this ride.
I think they know that there's a really good chance that Dallas will end up taking it.
I think whoever wins this series probably goes to the Stanley Cup Finals. To be honest, like we'll
I
get
was
into that
thinking about that
Vancouver
with the
Edmonton one
Dallas
later,
Vegas
but
series. I was thinking about that with the Dallas Vegas series. So honestly, it would make sense.
seeing the thing I like about Dallas so much in the series is their goaltending, man. Jake Ottinger.
He's
Like
been
again,
really good, man. Like he was really good against Vegas. Besides like game one, he was a little bit off, like right at the beginning, but he's been awesome, dude. Even like going back to that Calgary series a couple years ago when you guys
oh,
played him and you guys won, dude, he was like he had like a 955, like or something like that. Like it was one of the highest save percentages in a 7 game series. So I mean, it's the same thing. Rough regular season for him, kind of, I thought a little bit, but he's coming out to play in the playoffs, dude, when it matters.
yeah, no, I love him as a goaltender, and it's similar to Shesterkin, as you said. Like not the best regular season, but it's all about the playoffs, man. It's all about the playoffs. If anything shows you that, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. Great regular season team, not great in the playoffs. I think this series though, I do agree with you. I think Colorado comes back tonight, and I see it going at least 6, if not 7 games. It's it's gonna be a close one, and honestly, I just think that edge though is gonna be Jake Ottinger. Like I way more believe in Jake Ottinger in a 7 game series than I believe in Gorgiev on the other side. And that Val Nichushkin loss for the Colorado Avalanche, it's gonna be a big one, man. It's gonna be a big one. It's gonna be hard to hard to come back from. Let's move on and talk about the other Western Conference series going on right now. It's the Vancouver versus Edmonton, all Canadian matchup. So you love to see that at least one team, is going to be going on to the Western Conference Finals. Um, Mark, what do you think about this series though so far?
Honestly, I think it's gone pretty much how I've expected so far. I didn't really think it was going to be too easy for Edmonton. Vancouver's like a pretty hard-nosed team now to play against, I think, like since Talk it's kind of brought this new system into them a couple years ago. And um Like I feel like a lot of people think that it's just mostly come in with the coaching, but you got to think like, dude, they've made some changes to their decor over the
Yeah,
past year and a bit. I know we talked about this in office, and I think that was their problem before, right? Like they could always score goals. It was just keeping them out of the net and like pretty much leaving Demko hung out to dry, right? I feel like that's the way their past has gone, but now bringing in like Fronik's been good for Quinn Hughes. Like even guys like Ian Cole, Carson Soucy over the offseason, like those aren't flashy names, but those guys are big guys. They know how to play defense. You bring in Zadorov as well, who you're really familiar with. I think they have a really solid decor now too, dude. Like so I think they're kind of built to go on a longer run here. It's pretty impressive what they're doing with like this goaltender in net. I know he's like their technically third string guy. Honestly, dude, he's probably better than DeSmith already. Like
yeah,
he probably could have been the backup this year, but I mean like for just his development and getting more games in, probably Abbotsford was the right call, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is the backup next year. And like on the Oilers side, like I can see how it's been a little bit more difficult for them to like even generate some offense. I know it has been a little bit of a high scoring games, but um Vancouver came back from that one game when they were down like 4-1. That was such a huge game, man. And now obviously we're back in Edmonton for game number 4. But it's going to be huge for Edmonton to win to go back to Vancouver, knot it up because Vancouver's basically got the home ice now since they won that game 3, right? And you don't want if you're Edmonton, you don't want to go back to Vancouver 3-1 because even if you make it 3-2, like you saw it with Nashville, like it's really hard to win 3 in a row, right? So,
yeah.
um, if you're Edmonton, you're really hoping to squeeze out a game 4 victory here and kind of maybe take control of the series. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised at all if McDavid and Draisaitl and them like take it over and they end up winning. But um, I'm still a little bit skeptical about Stuart Skinner in the playoffs, man. I feel like he's been better in the regular seasons than the playoffs. I don't know if it's like workload exactly or what it is, but that's why I was always under like the impression of like they should get a good backup goalie. Like for a situation like this, if he falters or even needs like a game off in the playoffs, like you know what I mean? That's honestly why I was like pumping, like they should get Jake Allen. They should get Jake Allen as a backup. Like yeah, he's not going to start over him, but like he's an experienced guy, you know what I mean, who could potentially even right now like maybe get a game in, you know what I mean? And I don't know if they really trust Calvin Pickard to do that right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on the goaltending point for the Edmonton Oilers. Like Stuart Skinner, he's a younger guy too. In his whole career, he's been in the tandem with Jake Campbell so far outside of this season, where
Yeah. And the
he
thing is,
started the
it's like
most
he
amount of
hasn't,
games.
and it's like he had Campbell before to rely on for like a partner with NHL experience, but now it's like Pickard kind of used to be in the NHL. He's been an AHL guy for a while. It's like he's not a full tilt like NHL veteran. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
Skinner's still really young. Like honestly, I kind of feel for him a bit because they've kind of he has like exceeded expectations over the past couple years. Like last year, dude, he wasn't supposed to come in and be the starting goalie. Like that was supposed to be Jack Campbell and like kind of mentor this kid to become this. But I feel like it's the timeline has been pushed up for him a little bit in being the starter. And I don't think he's done a bad job at all. It's just like, I don't know if it's fatigue at this point in the playoffs. Like, it's a lot of games to play in the regular season and then this now, right? As like a 24, 25-year-old goaltender when you haven't really experienced it before.
yeah. When you look at Edmonton and Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner, what they really wanted to have is what Boston has with Allmark and Swayman, where you have the older goaltender who's very good, can play games. Maybe not he's at Vesna caliber. Like I'm not saying Edmonton was getting that from Jack Campbell, but they were wanting a player that would have been similar to that year in Toronto where he was really good, where he's not in the Vesna conversation, but he's up there as a top 10 goaltender in the league based off of performance, right? And they
Yeah.
have not gotten that whatsoever. And it has hurt Stuart Skinner because Stuart Skinner's been thrown in this position where he has to start as many games as possible, or else Edmonton maybe doesn't make the playoffs, or they're not in a good spot come playoff time, and they have some tougher matchups because of where they finished in the regular season. And now even in the playoffs, like you look at Swayman and Allmark, like Allmark started a couple games here in the playoffs. Like Stuart Skinner's like they're gonna ride him as hard as they can, and I don't think that's the best for him, and I don't think that's the best for the team to win a Stanley Cup.
And it's not like I agree with the whole like Like, I don't think Boston should have been like rotating goalies anyway, like with the whole
No,
Swayman thing. I think what they've been doing is smart, but I don't think it's a bad idea to give a guy a rest now and then. Like, honestly, even with like giving Kachekov one game for Carolina, yeah, I know they came in and lost, but Freddie, it's also like, dude, he was out most of the season with a blood clot issue. He played some games down the stretch at the end of the season. He played like 6 or 7 in a row. Like, he may have just needed an extra couple days break, man. Like, you're playing every other night. Like, during the season, you're not playing every other night as a goalie. You know what I mean? After a while, you're getting a break. The backup's coming in. So like, I don't really blame them like for doing that, even Carolina, because it was like you're probably better throwing in a fully rested Kochetkov than like a little bit
yeah,
fatigued Freddie Anderson. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like in Edmonton's case, if you had a guy like Jake Allen or someone else at this point, maybe you could throw him in for game 4 just to give Skinner a couple days off. You know what I mean? But now it's like Skinner's pressured to play every second night, and it's like I don't know, man. It's I think it's the fatigue part setting in, man. Like it's like if Boston was a better team, I feel like they'd be poised for a long run now, just because of like how rested Swayman is, been doing this back to back thing, like you know what I mean, all year with him and Allmark. But it's like I just don't think Boston has the team where they're gonna
yeah.
go on this deep long run, right? So um I don't know. I don't agree with the whole rotation in the playoffs, but I'm not opposed to giving a guy a night off, like even once a series or something like that.
Yeah, I think giving the guy the night off is you have to do it in the playoffs. Like it's a long grind in the playoffs, man. You got to win 16 games. You're probably going to play closer to mid 20s, high 20s worth of games in the playoffs. Like you
In
got to give
two
your
months too,
goaltender,
dude, right? Like
yeah,
it's a short span.
you got to give your goaltender a rest at some point. Like there are exceptions because like those there are like the top guys in the league who can play that every night and you can sort of get by with it. Like a guy like Bobrovsky, like I don't have too much worries with him playing every night, but Florida they even still have the option of throwing in their backup
Yeah.
Stolarz because
And
Stolarz was phenomenal throughout the regular season. It does help when it's the Florida Panthers and the team they play in front of gives up less chances than Edmonton. But still, like if Stolarz needed
yeah,
a game here in the playoffs or got a game here in the playoffs because Bob needed a night off, like that doesn't scare the shit out of me. If you're
no,
Edmonton
not at
and you're
all.
throwing Pickard in, like you're writing that down as an automatic loss almost, and unless Edmonton finds a way to score 5+ goals, and even if they do that, based off what we saw in game 1, like Edmonton could still blow that lead. I
Before we move
honestly,
on, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
I honestly think if Edmonton ends up losing this series, if it's 6 or 7 games, they're gonna look at that game 1 where they blew that lead and be like, "How the fuck did we do that?"
Yeah, no,
Like
that's
realistically, right now this series should be a 2-1 series for Edmonton, not Vancouver.
And I think that's what Nashville's looking back on when they played Vancouver and they blew that 3-1 lead and then it went to OT and they lost that game. What was it, game 4 or whatever? That I think that game was pretty much the series there. Before we move on though, like and it's not even like the fatigue thing. It's also just like your goalie depth chart, dude. Like look at the
Yeah.
Canucks right now, dude. They had to use 3 goalies in the first round because of injuries. Like you're telling me you'd be confident with throwing Calvin Pickard in there if Stuart Skinner tweaked something and was out day to day or week to week? Like I wouldn't be. And then you're bringing up an AHL young guy in Rodrigue to be the backup or maybe even start if Pickard's bad. Like I don't know, man. I wouldn't be opposed to going out and getting like even like a backup goalie at the deadline for like a late pick. I just think it's like
Yeah.
even to not have that pick, I think it's just worth it for the security. You know what I mean? Like
Well, you got Draisaitl who's coming towards the end of his contract. Like, who knows what he's gonna do, right? Like, I personally think he stays, but like if
I
Edmonton's
do. I
showing that,
think he does too. I think he stays. But yeah, you never know, right? Like I'm
yeah,
sure him and Connor talk about it. So I mean, like you know what I mean? Probably behind the scenes of what they're at least thinking with each other. It's obviously not public knowledge at all, but I mean that probably has a huge impact on his decision as well. Like he definitely loves playing with McDavid, right? So I mean, if he has the opportunity to stay and do that, and McDavid's up the year after, right? So I think he's definitely probably chatting with him a little bit about like what he thinks he's gonna do, you know?
yeah. And just before we move on to this next series, I just want to ask you one more thing about this goaltending sort of
Yeah.
situation Edmonton has going on. Would you almost rather go to Rodrigue if you had to play it? Like if you had to play your backup in the playoffs as Edmonton, would you almost rather go to Rodrigue than Pickard? Because from my point of view, like Pickard, you sort of know you know what you're getting, right? Like you know what you're getting from Pickard. He's proven himself over and over again that he's sort of like an AHL starter type of goalie. Where Rodrigue, like, yeah, he's not proven, but he has more upside. Like, who knows if he comes in and does what this Seelovs kid is doing, and it's like,
Yeah.
holy shit, he steals a game or two. Like, if I was Edmonton, I almost rather bring in Rodrigue and have him throw in a game, because at least if you lose that game or you get blown out, it's like, well, like our goalie, like we know what we have now with Rodrigue. So like at this point,
I
where
definitely wouldn't.
with
I
Pickard,
definitely
it's
wouldn't be
it's
opposed
there
to
and
it.
proven.
I definitely wouldn't be opposed to it, obviously, just because of the Seelovs thing that's been going on, right? It's not easy to kind of like find holes in new goalies that you haven't seen before. We've seen a lot of goalies kind of come into the NHL and almost like their rookie year, it's like they're unbelievable. And you
Joseph
think
Wall
they have
last year.
and you think they have like such a high upside, and sometimes it's just like they kind of just come back down to earth and then they understand how to beat them. I just wonder though, dude, if it actually came to that, if they would go to Rodrigue or if they would bring up Campbell just because of the experience, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like I don't really know what Ken Holland would do. You know what I mean?
See, based off the fact that at work with the amount of Bakersfield's games we watch, I've noticed that Jack Campbell now has a customized Bakersfield Condors mask. I think Jack Campbell is sort of in the AHL to stay. Like
I mean, that is fair. I mean,
I,
they're out of the playoffs too now. So I mean, I guess you could realistically go to either of them. Um, but I don't know, man. I wonder what they would do. But I think they would probably go Pickard first, even though Rodriguez would probably be a good idea.
yeah. Yeah, let's move on to this last series that's still going on. It's the Florida Panthers versus the Boston Bruins. Florida currently leads the series 3-1. They play tonight. We're recording in two parts here, so that's why you got the change of outfits. But Florida's playing tonight, so they can take the series here. Do you think this is ending in five, or does Boston force a game six?
I think it's over tonight. Honestly, I picked Florida in five. I just think that they're too powerful for Boston. Boston did put up a pretty good outing though in game four, to be honest. That was a close game. The last couple of games before I wasn't that impressed. Boston just I don't know, man. It seems like they're either getting shut down a lot or they just can't generate like any offense. Like
Yeah,
even last game, dude, it's like Swayman, okay, game two and three, was it his best? No. But I mean, it was not his freaking fault. Like those goals that he were letting in, it was just like they were getting these grade A chances and he just wasn't saving them. You know what I mean? But dude, he was unbelievable last game. Like he had like 41 saves. They lost 3-2. So like when you're getting your goalie that's playing that well, especially like he's back up to that level, you know what I mean? A couple games later, like you need to be snagging out a win. And they were up in that game 2-0 too. So I mean, I think that's the one game in this series that they're going to look back on and be like, well, we could have fucking tied the series. Like, as much as Florida's probably outplaying Boston in this series, like, you could have been going back to Florida 2-2 and it's anyone's
yep.
series, right? But now that it's 3-1, I don't see Boston doing what Florida did last year, coming back from 3-1, to be honest. I don't think they have the team to do it. Um, I do think it's going to end tonight, but I wouldn't be that surprised if Boston did squeeze out a victory. But I just don't think they're going to end up squeezing out like three in a row here. Um, what do you think, dude? Like,
I think it
I,
ends tonight, man.
I was going to say, do you think that we're going to see the same conference finals as last year now? Like, since Carolina's slowly coming back against the Rangers, like, could you see a Florida Carolina conference finals again, or like, I know we're not really talking about that series, or do you think it's going to be like Florida Rangers?
Honestly, I could see either or. Um, that Rangers Carolina series, I think it is going to come down to game seven in that series.
Yeah,
And at that point, dude, it's such a toss up, man. Such a toss up. What I will say though is this Eastern Conference Finals is going to be such a good series, dude. Like you're gonna have
it
Florida
it is.
versus
Yeah.
either New York or Carolina. Like whoever comes out of that New York Carolina series is going to put up a phenomenal game against the Florida Panthers in these Eastern Conference Finals, and I'm for sure going to be looking forward to that. But yeah, for Boston, dude, like when I look at Boston and sort of the way their team's constructed, it reminds me a bit of sort of what people were saying about Carolina a couple years ago, where it's like they're a really good team. They're a very good team, but they just don't have enough of that top end talent. Like Carolina, they're not that anymore. They got enough of the top end talent now. In my eyes, I think they do. But like Boston, now that they've lost Krejci and Bergeron, I think when you look at that team, it's like man, they're a very good team. Like they're going to be in the playoffs. They're probably going to win a round, but they just don't have enough of that top end talent to go on a real serious run. And with Marchand at the end of his career, I think Boston needs to do something over this offseason to maybe go out and spark things up a little bit. Like I know people were saying like if Jim Montgomery lost that first round of the Leafs, like his job was gone. I don't think you fire him even if you lose to Florida in 5. Like he's a great coach.
No,
I think it's
no.
more with the roster construction of this team, and I think they need another. I'm not saying they need another superstar, but I think they need another like 30 goal scorer,
Well,
25 goal
it
scorers in that
would be nice
lineup.
to even get a first line center though. Like
Yeah,
that would be ideal, right? Like you got Coyle and Zaka trying to fill that hole, who I don't think did a bad job this year, but I mean, I'd say they were kind of carried a little bit, like production wise by like Pasta, you know what I mean?
yeah.
But I can't lie to you, dude. I was really curious about Pasta going into this season. He's a great player, but it's like he didn't have Bergeron anymore, right? Like that's a huge player to not be playing with, but he still seemed to look great. Like you know what I
Oh
mean? Like
yeah.
he didn't seem this year like oh this guy was carried a bit by He's incredibly skilled, but he was carried by Bergeron. Like probably in some areas of the game, sure, but like in accordance to like playing a whole 200-foot game and being able to produce points, like Pasternak's a great player and probably one of the better players in the NHL.
I think
Um,
Pasta's a top 5 winger in the NHL easily. It's not even
for
close.
sure, and it's like Marchand's a great player, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't think he was better a couple of years ago. But I mean, that's also I think the age that's getting to him too, right? But
Yeah,
he's
he's 36 now.
still very good. He's still producing a lot. Ideally, yeah, it'd be nice for them to go out and get like another 30 goal score or something like that. But they definitely need to be looking at a number one C wherever they can get that. I know it's not easy to come by, but I think you just say fuck it and like you got to trade your first round pick if you got to do that, dude. Like this team has proved that they can make the playoffs pretty much every year, so it's like I wouldn't even be worried about that being a lottery pick, right? Like so it's like at the Bruins at this point in time, like wouldn't you just prefer to sacrifice like a bottom 15 pick in the first round to go out and get like a first line center to be able to
Oh,
like
with
try and go at the last runs? And it's like you also have this huge asset that you're probably going to use this summer in Linus Ullmark for a trade because Swayman is ready. Not that Ullmark's a great goalie, dude. He's probably a top 10 goalie in the league, and that's going to be really attractive to teams, dude. You know what I mean? So I would go out and consider making a move that if you can get your first round pick and Ullmark to potentially get like even a first line center, I say you do it, dude.
oh, I do it without even blinking an eye, man. Like that Jeremy Swayman's going to be that guy for the Boston Bruins going forward. So Linus Ullmark just doesn't. He just does. He's not going to fit in with this team going forward. So not only is he a great trade asset and a great trade piece, but like you sort of have to for Boston move on from this guy because you can't be paying both these goalies the
No,
money that they're both going to be
With
making.
Swayman being an RFA, and it does suck a bit because they you could tell they love each other, those two guys. Allmark willingly signed in Boston, right? Like he wasn't
Yeah.
traded there, and he's played fantastic for most of the time he's been here. It's just that you have this young stud coming up who is just taking over the net. You know what I mean? So it's almost just time to move on. But yeah, they don't have a lot of prospects in their system, but like, dude, what's more valuable than like a proven NHL like goalie that's been like wins the Vezina last year and it was still great this year. He's had like 6 seasons in a row of like a 915 plus save percentage. Like he's consistent. You know what I mean? Like you know what you're getting from this guy. And it's going to be really attractive to teams and they're going to have to try and figure out what they want to do exactly because obviously it's not like first line centers are hanging on trees for trades here, right? Like they're gonna have to try and make something work, but I think if you're the Bruins, you just gotta go for it, dude. You have to explore
Oh,
every single option. You even look at Elias Lindholm in free agency. Like I told you, I think he's going to get way overpaid, but I think you're not doing your due diligence if you at least don't ask, okay, what do you want? You know what I mean? Because maybe if it's a good price, you're getting a free asset. You know what I mean? Besides
yeah.
having to pay him, you don't have to give up assets for him. You know what I mean?
See, the thing with Boston that's interesting though is that, like their center depth is decent. When you look at their center depth, it is good. It's just they don't have that top guy. Like I like Coyle, I like Zaka. You got that Matthew. I'm gonna butcher his name, Matthew Poitras kid.
Yeah.
Like yeah, he was injured, but he showed like for his little time in the NHL, he did show some improvement and a lot of potential there. So it's like you have sort of those three guys. So it's like, yeah, like they need a number one center, but even if they're not getting like that absolute number one, even if it's more like a sort of like a 1B type of player, I still
Yeah,
think that
no,
it makes them so much better
absolutely.
because then you have Zoc as your second line center, you have Coyle as your third line center, and then you throw Poitras on the wing somewhere within the middle six there.
And the thing is, it's like I think Coyle and Zaka probably played at like a 2C level this year, right? Like
Yeah,
I think that's where they have it covered. And even like one guy who's been playing really well, I think at least in these playoffs too, that's been playing 3C is Morgan Geekie. He's
yeah,
been pretty good too, right? But he can also play the wing. So it's like Boston has pieces that um they can surround with, right? Like their depth isn't bad. Dude, like I really like Trent Frederick, man. Like I think he's kind of a dog out there. He plays the wings. He's a really tough guy. You know what I mean? Like they have some pieces that kind of will help you win, but I think they're just lacking probably that top end talent. And I don't know. It's their decor is not great. They obviously have the number one guy and number two guy in Lindholm and McAvoy, but I think it does kind of drop off after that. I think they could probably use another top four defenseman, but man, I want to talk about have you seen this Mason Lowry kid?
no, I don't even know the
Dude,
name to be honest.
you should. So he didn't start the series against the Leafs. He came in when Andrew Peeke got injured. And dude, you got to watch this guy play, man. He is really good. I think he could potentially be a top four guy for the Bruins eventually. I think he's got 4 or 5 points in 10 games. So that's definitely a bright spot for the Bruins, considering they don't have a lot of prospects that kind of come out of their system and make an impact in the NHL. He was playing in college a couple years ago and spent most of the year in Providence this year, but that's definitely a bright spot for them for the future. But we've talked a lot about them, and you're right. It's like, for a couple of years now, I've been like, oh, I don't know if these guys are gonna make the playoffs, like without like Bergeron, Krejci, you know what I mean, taking a step back. But I'm convinced now that they're gonna be like a playoff team for like at least the next couple of years. It's just like they don't really scare me going into the
Yeah,
playoffs, right? And there was a reason why I picked the Leafs, and I think it was just more like head-to-head roster construction, and I just thought that the Leafs were gonna say fuck it this year and take it over against Boston. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. Boston's definitely going to have some decisions to make. They're not completely done from this series yet. I know we've been just kind of spitballing about their off season, but I don't see a situation where they're coming back from 3-1.
before before we move on from the whole Boston talk, I'm looking at a list sort of sentiment around the NHL right now, and Elias Lindholm, of course, he's a UFA, so could be interesting to see maybe if Boston makes a run at him and they trade Allmark for something else, and maybe it's not one of those top centers, but St. Louis, like the St. Louis, the issue with them is they don't need a goalie right now, which doesn't really help my mock trade here. But St. Louis has Robert Thomas, who he had a phenomenal year this year, and since that 2019 Stanley Cup winning team, they haven't really done too much. It's like, does Boston maybe try to make a run at him? It doesn't help that you have Binnington already, so like the Allmark piece isn't really
Yeah.
that
I
great.
just don't
But
know if they want to move on from him, dude. He's probably their best player.
okay, and
He
then
had a great season last year.
the other one I'm looking at is I think we have talked about this at work potentially before, is Martin Nichas on the Carolina Hurricanes. Because
That would be an interesting one. He does play the wing mostly, but I mean, he could play center too.
he can play center. He's a younger player. Carolina, they have a lot of money coming off the books at the end of the season, a lot of guys to re-sign. Like, so it's like maybe you move on from him, you bring in a younger player that allows you to go back and re-sign Jake Gensel like easily.
Yeah, that's very true. Because they got to
For
lock up
them,
Jarvis this year. They've got Shea's a free agent, Pesci's a free agent. I don't see them all coming back, to be honest, but Teravainen's a free agent as well. So they're gonna have some huge decisions to make. That is an interesting one though, Nikash.
I
Because
think
Jarvis is just taking such a step, right?
yeah.
Like it's almost like he should be getting that top six spot.
And the thing with Nishas too is he's only on a 2 year deal right now, so you're gonna have to sign him again at some point here within the next couple of years, right? And he's gonna get a pay upgrade from the 6 mil a year that he's making right now. So
You
It's
know
like,
what guy I kind of wonder about, and I don't know if they'd be willing to move him, but I've always really liked him, and he's on a pretty good contract, is Nick Schmaltz.
yeah,
Like he's probably like a 1B like center, right? I wouldn't say he's a number one center. I honestly don't think he gets enough like he doesn't get appreciated enough. He actually produces at a pretty good level. I honestly could see him being pretty good with Pasta. If the Coyotes or Utah would be willing to do that, I don't know if they would. You know what I mean? Because then they don't really have, there's a huge drop off in centerman after. But maybe they want Logan Cooley to like almost like be ready right away to take that spot, right? So Nick Schmaltz is always like when I hear like a team needs a center, like a good center, I always wonder if like Arizona would be willing to move him because he makes under 6 million bucks too. Like it's not a bad price tag. And he's put
see,
up like 70 plus points like before he like you know what I mean? He's produced in the past.
yeah, I think it would be an interesting one for me. Honestly, I just think they got to do a bit more than Nick Schmaltz. I think if you
Okay.
bring in Nick Schmaltz, like I think Nick Schmaltz and Pavel Zok are too like the production you get from them are too close. I think they need somebody like that's just a
Like another level higher even.
yeah, just like a tier up. Like I don't know who that is right now. Honestly, I think the Elias Lindholm right now is looking like the best option because a lot of these other guys either aren't going to get traded or
Yeah, it's just like who's gonna be willing to move like a 1C or like
yeah,
something even below that. See, I was always curious at the deadline, like they said that whole Allmark to LA rumor got shut down, right? Because of he declined it. Like, what do you think that they were trying to get from LA? Like, my assumption is like they probably were going for one of their goalies in Talbot or Riddick,
yeah.
if Allmark was going there, and then were they going for another center? Like my thought is, was it Deneau? Because I
I
don't
think
think they're going
you
for Dubois after that. I don't think they
no,
were going
there's
for Dubois.
no
They're not moving Kopitar.
no.
Unless they were going for some other forward. Because LA doesn't really have much D to give up, right? Like I don't like at least right now, like Matt
They
Roy's
could
going
have
to be a
it could have
free
been
agent.
Brant it could have been Brant Clark, but honestly, I don't think like Boston. I
I
don't think
kind of
Boston's
doubt
doing that
it,
trade.
dude.
I really doubt it. That's the only like young
You mean
defenseman.
LA? You mean LA doing that trade? I don't think LA's doing that trade for
See, I
Allmark.
don't
Do you
think
think?
Boston's. I don't think either side does that trade. The reason I say Boston, I don't think does that trade is because it doesn't make them better right now. Like
Yeah, that's true. And
if
they're in
you're
go for it mode. So like, do
if
you
you're
think
getting
it
rid
could
of
have?
Allmark mid-season,
Yeah,
you're doing it to get better right now, and that would make them better. The ones the forwards I'm looking at right now that would have been interesting is Adrian Kempe potentially. Was it him maybe in
maybe,
the deal? And the other one would
maybe.
be Kevin Fiala. Like I do think it could have
Could
been
have been.
I do think it could have been Deneau as well. The thing with Deneau though is like again, you're just getting another middle six center. You're not getting that.
Very true, dude. But like, you got to think that they're so used to his style with Bergeron that it's like getting another elite defensive centerman like may have been
Yeah.
like high on their radar. That's why I do wonder that, right?
And at that point, you knew that you were probably going to play the Leafs at some point in the playoffs too. And we all know what Deneau does to Austin Matthews.
He's good,
So,
and look, he doesn't produce a lot, but he's good in the playoffs, man. Like he can
oh
shut
yeah,
down your best players. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's interesting just to talk about it and kind of like theorize like what it could have been and like what they might be aiming for the future here. But Boston, I think there's definitely a decent amount of changes to come with this team. And they're gonna have to go out and get some other goaltender too, unless they're bringing up their guy from the AHL. But it sucks, man. Like I as a Habs fan, like I don't like Boston very much, but like I kind of respect the hell out of Marchand, and like I would love to see him go on like another run. But it's just like these last couple of years, I just haven't been convinced that it's gonna happen.
yeah. No, I completely agree with you there. Let's before we sort of wrap up the podcast here, we ought to talk about Florida, man. Like, dude, they are such a good team. I like
They are.
I know I have that futures on Dallas, and I've just talking about that nonstop here on the podcast and at work. But I think if anybody else is going to win the cup other than Dallas, like my money's on Florida, dude. Like you got the goaltender and Bob. You got like dude, their forwards are crazy, man. You got Kachuk, you got Barkov, you got Reinhardt, you got Verhaeghe. Verhaeghe is probably the most clutch playoff performer that's an active player right now.
Well,
And
5 game OT winning goals in like a couple seasons. Yeah, he's came through clutch in so many times for that team. And I just think Florida's roster construction it is pretty good, right? Like you've got a lot of different kind of types of players on the team, which you do like. Like you've got your sniper in Reinhardt, like Barkov is just a complete 200-foot player. Matthew Tkachuk, it's like you get the luxury of a guy who can get under people's skin and like
yep,
produce points at a high level. And it seems like he ups his game in the playoffs too. Um, and then you go down the list, you got like Sam Bennett, guy's a prick to play against. You talked about Verhaeghe. Dude, you didn't even mention Tarasenko, dude. Like he hasn't
yep.
even been that great, but like,
Lundell,
dude, there's a guy that has won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues a couple years ago. He's got that experience. Um, you got Lundell, you talked about. I hate him, but like Nick Cousins is an effective player on that fourth line.
yep.
Um, then you go to their D, and it's like
don't even get me going
the
here,
thing
dude.
is, it's like Montour wasn't as good as he was last year, but he's got a lot of different elements in his game, dude. He's a great skater. He's feisty. He can shoot the fucking puck. There's going to be a lot of interest in him this offseason if he does hit unrestricted free agency. Aaron Ekblad, I definitely don't think was as good as he was a couple years ago, but he's still a really effective player that can play in your top four and even slide into that top pairing. One guy I know we've mentioned before, but I think he just does not get enough credit is Gustav Forsling. Holy shit, dude, is this guy a good fucking player? I've been watching this guy
Yep.
in the playoffs and the way he like remains like the gap control he has on some of these top players and he's able to dude, like Pasta's like having trouble getting around him at times, dude, just because he plays so well defensively. He's got such an active stick, and that's what you need, dude. Like you got a guy in Montour who I will say is probably not the best defensively. Like it's definitely the one part in his game that I think he can improve. But when you pair him with fucking Forsling, dude, it's like you have like no worries, man. And it's like the two comparisons I go back to for that is like when Dougie Hamilton was in Carolina and he's playing with Slavin. It's like you go offensively, dude. I'll fucking stay back and help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and I think that's just such a perfect pairing there. And I wonder if like they're going to end up re-signing Montour because they got to re-sign Reinhardt too. It's going to be a lot of money, man. Like people don't realize like a couple of these guys might be gone. Like they might not have the exact same team that they have been rolling with the past couple of years. And yeah, they might take discounts because it's Florida. But dude, you got Montour making 3.5 million right now.
He's
Reinhardt
making at
making
least
six and a
six.
half.
Yeah.
Like Reinhardt to me is probably looking at just under 10. I would say 9.5 ish for 50
Yep.
plus goals. I think he can argue that for sure. And then Montour, honestly, dude, if he hits UFA, I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting 7.
Yeah.
Seriously, I
Oh,
think he probably could. He might take a bit of a discount to stay in Florida. But what I'm trying to say is like you have both those guys right now for $10 million total, and next year one of those guys might just be making $10 million, right? So it's like you gotta have to figure the cap out that way. But when you're in the situation, like, and you got players on really good contracts, like, you got to go for it. And that's what they've done, bringing in Tarasenko. Even like Kyle Okposo, dude, like, that's a guy who's been around the league for quite some time. He's a captain. He's not been in the lineup every night, but you need guys to be there in case there's injuries. And he's filled in and done a pretty good job. Obviously, Bob and Ned has been solid. I don't think his numbers are really reflecting how well he's playing right now. I think he has like around a 900 save percentage, but I think it's more or less he's been letting in 2 on like 20-ish shots every night. But I will say though, there's been times where like he's kind of just been left out to dry. And he's
yeah.
made that huge save, right? Like you saw in the Tampa series, and even a couple times in this series here. Like he's been really good, right? Like he's playing a really good goalie down the rink there, and Jeremy Swayman. And I think Bob, it's like as a goalie, I can tell you it is not easy when you see another goalie getting all these shots and being in the game, and you're basically out shooting that team 2-1. And it's hard to stay in the rhythm when you're not feeling the puck, right? It gets a lot more difficult than people think. And I think that as a goalie, you have to learn how to play when you're getting peppered and when you're not getting a lot of shots, right? So I think that Bob is doing a really good job at that. And I think when he gets called upon later in these playoffs, he's going to be ready.
Yeah, that's the thing I love about Bob is like maybe he doesn't have the best save percentage right now, but he gives you the big saves when you need it the most. Like I
Yeah,
don't care if he lets in 2 weak ones a game. If he's giving you the big saves when you need him as a team, like that's really what matters.
like for instance, I think earlier in the series they won and he let in 2 goals on 18 shots. So like that's just under a 900 save percentage, but within the last couple minutes of the game, they were at 14, 15 shots, and he made like 2 or 3 huge saves in the last 2 minutes to literally to basically hold that game off for them. And it's like his save percentage at the end, it's gonna look like, oh, he didn't really play that good. But it's like, dude, if he wasn't there, that game's going to fucking OT, and you
Yeah.
never know what can happen. You know what I mean? So Bob, it's like he's got the experience. He's a great goal. He seems like a great guy too. I'm always cheering for Bob, but I think Florida's going on to the conference finals, and I think they've got a pretty good shot no matter who they play, the Rangers or Carolina.
The other thing I really like about this Florida defenseman, just to touch on them once again quickly here, is they're all really good puck movers out of their own end. Even
Yeah.
even guys like that are playing lower in that lineup for the defenseman, like OEL, he's a good puck moving guy. And yeah, like you think it might not help out that much in your own end, but like it helps out so much on breakouts because as a winger, instead of having to take something that's off the boards or off the glass, you're taking a tape to tape pass on the breakout. You're not having to pick up you're not having to pick up a ring around off the boards and then move it up the ice. Like you're taking a nice tape to tape pass, and it's really allowing Florida to have these quick breakouts, and it's forcing the Boston defensemen and forwards not to have the best gaps going through the neutral zone and back into their own end. And I just wanted to mention how good of puck movers they are because I love good puck moving defensemen, and I think it helps out on forwards dramatically, pardon me. And I don't think that gets talked about enough on how easy it makes wingers' lives in the NHL
Well,
when you
and
have
like
all
not
those
to
puck moving
not to
guys.
not to hate on it at all, but like that's been the talk with the Leafs defensemen for a while, right? Like they kind of lack that, and it's like guys are just always rimming the puck out or flicking it out, right? And it's like you got these such talented forwards up there that it would be nice, like if there were a couple more guys that could just put it
Yeah.
on their tape, you know what I mean? And like let those guys kind of just fly up the neutral zone with the puck, right? Instead of having to like battle off the boards or like potentially deal with a giveaway or something. You know what I mean? So I definitely think it is really valuable to have that. And Florida has definitely got a couple different guys that can do that.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I think that sort of wraps up the podcast though for this week. I know tonight we could have two series. Actually, no, just the one series finished tonight because I think Florida Boston plays tonight and then Vancouver Edmonton's the late game. So Florida, I say they take it here tonight in five. Edmonton, they make it 2-2 going back to Vancouver. It should
I'd
be a
love to
fun
see
week.
that.
Should be a fun week here though as these round two matchups end and we get into the conference finals for each conference. I think next time we record though, probably most all these series are probably going to be done, and we'll be able to fully break them down and talk about the conference finals and do a little preview on them. So thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll be back next week with more on the NHL playoffs.